Debuting on Netflix April 1st, 2022 is veteran director Richard Linklater's Apollo 10.5. Let me tell you why I'm recommending this movie and why I think it's a little bit more complicated than it appears to be, coming up next. Apollo 10.5 takes place in the summer of 1969 in a Houston, Texas suburb. It's about, ostensibly, Richard Linklater's life, even though the main character is not named Richard Linklater. Nevertheless, this seems to be a biographical or autobiographical film, partly or maybe a lot about Linklater's own life. The movie is upon, of course, it's on the Apollo 11 mission, which is the mission to the moon landing in the summer of 1969, but 10.5, the age of the boy in this movie, who lives a sort of fun, idyllic existence in the Houston, Texas suburbs. The film is rotoscoped, and this, of course, Linklater has done many times in Waking Life, A Scanner Darkly. He's used this animation style, this particular film style, so now here's another film that is in this style, and of course it's filmed with real actors, and yet there's a process by which it looks animated and end product. Now this movie does two things at the same time. One has this kid's imaginary vision of being Neil Armstrong and the kid actually going to the moon and then landing on the moon and being part of the NASA mission. This is partly because this kid is around NASA in the Houston area and it sort of dominates his existence. His dad, for example, works at shipping and receiving at NASA, and we see the dad in a suburban family home, for example, and the kid wishing his dad was, well, more involved in NASA or more high up the chain, as it were. The other element of the film, and I think this dominates, I think this is the better part of the film, for me, at least on the first viewing, was a review of the historical details of what it was like to live in Houston, Texas, or around Houston, Texas, circa 1969. The movie goes into a great number of particular details, such as how the mother cooked ham and how she used ham in all the meals, how they packed lunches for kids, going to Astro World as a kid, for example, playing out in the suburbs, and what it was like to watch TV at this time. There's a number of fun, interesting details in a very long montage sequence early in the movie, maybe 30 to 40 minutes long, the whole thing being narrated by Jack Black. He does a deadpan narration style. There's not a lot of outrageous voiceover stuff from him, but that makes this movie even funnier. I laughed out loud a lot during this movie. I thought it was very clever, that just the overview or the review of the historical details of the private life of this nuclear family in Houston, Texas in 1969. The movie as a historical artifact is really interesting because you compare it to 2022, the way people move and operate, what they eat, how they live today. And I think the movie is trying to do this thing where 1969 was a foreign world. It's very different. First of all, everything was unsafe. All the kids played recklessly. There was no safety precautions back then. There was more pollution back then. There was the hope and dreams of a science fictional existence going out to the moon and beyond, for example. A lot of pro-US rhetoric. A kid relating to the world only through a television set. The family gathering around the television set. A lot of interesting sociological observations. This movie reminded me, as I was watching it, of a set of books that I have that are fascinating called A History of Private Life, in which, over these several volumes, they document how real people, not the great people of history, the movers and shakers, but ordinary people, how they lived, what they ate, how they dressed, what they liked to do in their free time. And this movie has all of those details. Thus, I find it to be a really interesting documentary exercise, even though this is not a documentary, but it feels like it. And a lot of people watch this for nostalgia reasons, especially older people. It will be, oh, remember when you did this, or remember when you watched this. And I'm only 42 years old, so I'm a little bit younger than Linklater, was doing a dance of both. I was going, whoa, what, they did that back in 1969? That was weird. But I also have some fond memories, or this movie dredged up some fond memories that look like my own childhood, even though that took place almost 20 years after this movie. So I think viewers will have different relationships to this movie. Older people might see this as nostalgia. Younger people might see this as, well, that's weird, they did that back then in 1969. And I think that's the idea of the movie. It is kind of a historical review of a private life of a boy in this period of time. The movie thus will be accused, I think, of being a nostalgia exercise, and I think that's partly just. However, Linklater is a better director, a better artist than just doing a nostalgia review. So I ask a couple questions when I watch this. Why is this rotoscoped, for one? He could have just shot this as, straightforward, realistic film with real actors, but he didn't. He presents this in the rotoscope animation style. Also, he puts in or appends this imagined journey to the moon by this boy, which obviously didn't happen. I think what's happening part with rotoscope and the vision of going to the moon is this is maybe a false memory or a skewed colorized memory. Linklater clearly acknowledges, in my opinion, that his memories of 1969 Houston are warped and distorted, as all memories are, and that's perfectly fine. That's the way humans work. Memories are, in fact, nostalgic, especially if childhood feels idyllic or kind or nice or pleasant in relation to one's adult life. So there's no problem there. And then the rotoscoping it, well, is my memory all correct? Let me show you what my memory of that time was like, and thus Linklater rotoscopes it. Now, he's worked, as I said, with this medium, and he's also the director of Personal Change. He made a movie called Boyhood, which was filmed over a number of years, and you literally see a boy grow up on film in front of your eyes. He also did the Before trilogy, which shows a couple in 3 different instances in their life relating to each other, and the change that goes on there. He did Dazed and Confused, of course, which was a high school movie, and I feel like when I watch Apollo 10½, I'm seeing the early vision of the Houston, Texas, growing up in the 1960s stuff that then I append to his other filmography. So watch Apollo 10½, Dazed and Confused, Waking Life, which is about college and philosophy and being unaware or uncertain of who one is, the Before trilogy. You watch all of his movies in a certain order and you will see a growing up. So I viewed Apollo 10½ as the boyhood part of a number of his films, the early film in his sort of sequence of growing up. And then I felt like the kid in Apollo 10½ was going to become the high schooler, one of the high schoolers in Dazed and Confused. And when I look at his whole filmography this way, I don't see Apollo 10½ as nostalgia. I see it as a piece of a whole, or a broader whole, that is really interesting because he's describing a private life or a private self or an individual self as it changes with the times from the 60s maybe all the way up to the present day. For those reasons, I don't find this film to be a nostalgia exercise, although it will be watched that way. I thought, again, this was very funny, very well made. I thought the ending had some poignant stuff in it. So for all those reasons, I'm going to watch this again, show it to my family, because the PG-13 rating is outrageous. It makes 0 sense that this is rated PG-13 in the United States. It's a PG movie for sure, and anybody could watch this movie and kind of delight in it. And I think for my own children, it'd be good to watch this and see what life was like back in the 60s or something like that. So this movie is really pretty good overall, and I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, which means I liked it, and I probably will rewatch it and maybe even study it in the future. What do you think of Apollo 10½? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you. Have a great day.